obviously it makes something, you know, special.
The euphoria that greeted Liverpool's historic treble last season means there are high expectations of success in the Champions League too. First, though, they have to overcome tricky opponents tonight.
I think it's a typical Portuguese side that the players are individually very skillful and quick, and I've heard that their strikers are very good players, so it's going to be a hard evening for us.
So tonight Anfield stages a match in Europe's elite club competition for the first time in 16 years. The priority for Liverpool is a good win over Boa Vista as they seek to qualify for the second phase of the Champions League. Damien Johnson, BBC News at Anfield.
Well, there are also matches in Groups C and D today. Arsenal travel to Mallorca for their opening game in Group C, while Schalke entertain Panathinaikos of Greece. In Group D, Nantes are at home to PSV Eindhoven, while Lazio travel to Istanbul to face Galatasaray. Well, away from football now, and South Africa have completed a 9-wicket victory over Zimbabwe in the first test in Harare. It was a double disappointment for Zimbabwe wicketkeeper Andy Flower. He fell just 1 run short of becoming only the 5th batsman ever to score a century and a double century in the same match. Flower was unbeaten on 199 when the Zimbabwe innings ended on 391. Flower's second innings performance had prevented an innings defeat, but he couldn't stop the South Africans coasting to victory. They reached their 78-run target for the loss of just 1 wicket. Tennis, Nicholas Kiefer has made a surprise exit in the first round from the ATP President's Cup in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. The 5th-seeded German, who won the tournament in 1999, was beaten in straight sets, 7-5, 6-4, by the Czech Daniel Vacek at the top of the screen here. The win was Vacek's first on the tour all year. He'd been knocked out in the first round of the 3 previous tournaments in which he'd played, but his big serve proved the decisive factor against Kiefer. Vacek will now face another German, that's Rainer Schuttler, in the second round. Well, there are still 3 races to go in a Formula One season already brought effectively to a premature end by the early championship wins of Michael Schumacher and his Ferrari team. The first of the 3 being the Italian Grand Prix this Sunday, so a party atmosphere at Monza certainly is guaranteed. For other teams, there's some soul-searching to do, though. At BAR, for instance, where the team's underperformance has been scrutinised with a view to improvement next season. That'll come, they hope, with a new car, which is scheduled for its launch in December. Driver Jacques Villeneuve is expecting much more from 2002.
Every race that goes by is 1 race less to go before the end of the season, which is great because this year has been very difficult, and all we can do now is wait and hope for a better year next year, for a better car next year. So no, it's good. The season is nearing its end. The races that are coming are fun. Monza is fun. America was always fun, and then Japan is it's a beautiful track. So it's a good way to finish the season on the fun side.
On to baseball now. The St. Louis slugger Mark McGwire has set up the Cardinals for yet another victory. They trounced the Milwaukee Brewers 8-0 on the road.
Average. But
baseball fans have been focusing on Barry Bonds' record-chasing home run spree this season. But the current record holder for homers in a single season, Mark McGwire, showed he's still got the touch. St. Louis were at Milwaukee, and McGwire's 2-run homer in the second set the Cardinals on their way. Half his 48 hits this season have been home runs. It was in the 4th inning that the Cardinals blew the game right open, scoring 6 runs that effectively killed off the Brewers' challenge. Jim Edmonds started the push with a single to right centre field. Then Placido Polanco scored a single with the bases loaded to push the Cardinals' lead to 7-0. The final run of the game came off a wild.
And we're getting reports of a plane crash in the World Trade Center in New York. You can see the pictures there. It's one of New York's tallest buildings. That's all the information we know at the moment, but as you can see, it is a considerable collision and there is a large fire. That's all the information we have at the moment, but we'll be back with more details in just a short while at the top of the hour.
Well, we have one final story for you. The New York Giants, last season's Super Bowl runners-up, have been beaten in their first match of the new NFL season. The Giants lost by 31 points to 20 at Denver, but the victory for the Broncos came at a price. Wide receiver Ed McCaffrey is set to miss the rest of the season after breaking his leg after making a catch in the 3rd quarter. Before his injury, McCaffrey scored the second of the Broncos' 4 touchdowns. Former Giant caught his 44th TD pass as a Denver player in the second quarter to tie the Broncos team record before his horrific injury. So there we are, that's all from Sport Today. Goodbye.
Death was all around. Something that you'll never forget and will always live with you.
With over 250 correspondents, we're always close to the story. BBC World.
As we come on air, we have serious news of a major possible air crash in the United States. A plane appears to have crashed into one of New York's tallest buildings, the World Trade Center. As you can see, those are pictures of smoke pouring out of a gaping hole in the upper floors of the World Trade Center. It is in the downtown area of Manhattan and is one of the most heavily populated office buildings in New York. All we know at this moment is that there has been a plane crash in the morning time in New York. The plane smashed into one of the twin towers of the New York World Trade Center about half an hour ago. That's the information that we've got. And you can see the smoke and flames billowing from the building. One eyewitness said that it was a twin-engine plane, possibly a 737, which flew straight into the World Trade Center. It's believed that some bits of the plane may still be embedded in the building. For viewers who are just joining us at the top of the hour, we're watching pictures of smoke billowing out of the World Trade Center in New York, the result of a plane crash, it's believed, which took place about half an hour ago in New York. An eyewitness said there was a huge explosion. They thought, in fact, that the blast had come from inside. Pictures, as I said, of the World Trade Center on fire as a result of a plane crash into the upper stories of one of the tallest buildings in New York. We have no immediate word at the moment on injuries or fatalities in the disaster. It happened shortly before 9 a.m. local time. One eyewitness said the plane was coming in low and it looked like it hit at a slight angle. Large holes are visible in two sides of the building. It's a 110-story building, one of the landmark Twin Towers in the southern part of Manhattan. If you're just joining us, we're watching pictures of the World Trade Center on fire in New York, the result of a plane crash by what's thought to have been a twin-engine plane, possibly a 737, which appears to have flown directly into the World Trade Center, flying low. No news at the moment of injuries or fatalities. As you can see, there's a considerable fire there. We've got two large holes on two sides of the World Trade Center. It's a 110-story building. Let's get the latest now. The BBC's Jim Fish joins me. Jim, what can you tell us?
Well, very few more details than what you've already said, Nisha. All we know is that it's described as a passenger plane. We don't know how many passengers it was carrying. It does seem to have entered the trade tower very high up, and there are gaping holes on both sides of the tower. It looks as if it's penetrated right through the structure of it. We don't know precisely how many floors are affected. We don't know the number of casualties or injuries, but it is quite clearly a major disaster.
It's the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center, which we're looking at the moment, ablaze with thick smoke coming out of two sides of the building, the result of a plane crash by what's thought to be a twin-engined jet plane, possibly a 737. The accident is reported to have taken place at 9 a.m. local time. Joining us now on the phone from New York is Steve Evans, who was, I believe, in the building at the time. Steve, what can you tell us about what happened this morning?
People are running away very, very quickly. There are more explosions further down the building. It was calm until we came on the air now, but I'm now looking up at this building, and there is smoke billowing from the very top, but then there is a fire and an explosion about 20 stories further down. I was at the base of the building when it happened. There was one huge bang, the building physically shook. Then another 2 or 3 bangs, and the building again shook, and people came screaming past me.
At the moment, it looks as if both buildings are on fire.
Clearly, the thing is out of control. As I say, there is smoke billowing out from further and further down the building, and people are simply moving back. They don't know what has happened. Initially, the assumption was that it was a bomb. People have been coming past me now saying, no, it was an aircraft which hit the building. More than that, I cannot say, apart from to tell you that people here are very, very frightened. People are crying. People are shaking. They've stopped running away from the building. They are now walking away. There is moisture raining down from a clear sky. I only presume that comes from the disaster which is going on above me as I speak.
It must be a very busy scene, Steve. Are there a lot of people there?
Well, there are a lot of people. The man whose phone it is asking me, he's evacuating the shop, and I have to get off, I'm afraid, because he wants his phone back, and we have to leave. I'll stay with it here. There are people who are very, very frightened. Clearly, this is a very high, it is one of the tallest buildings in the world. There is an uncontrollable event involving explosions and fire going on above us. People simply don't know what's happening. An awful lot of people are just getting as far away as they possibly can.
Steve Evans, thank you for joining us from the World Trade Center. So clearly chaos there. The explosions still continuing. At the moment, it's not really clear whether there was a plane crash or exactly what went on, Jim.
Well, we are getting reports that a twin-engined jet liner was Jet Airliner, was the aircraft involved. That hasn't been confirmed. That is coming from an eyewitness. In terms of we are seeing both, it seems that both towers are affected by this. It could be that the aircraft went through one, right through, and the debris has affected the other tower as well. Obviously, what we don't know is what the emergency services are managing to do. There are, surprisingly at the moment, no signs of helicopters around the towers. Maybe that means that the emergency services are already on the spot within the tower, but that, by the look of the damage there, they will have great difficulty getting within range of that fire inside the towers, 110 stories high. The right-hand tower, it looks like the top 10 or possibly even more stories are affected. Lower down on the left-hand tower, it could be even more stories are affected.
If you've just joined us, we're just looking at pictures from the World Trade Center in New York, which is ablaze as a result of a plane crash, a plane flying in low, which went into one of the towers, possibly both of the towers, because clearly now both of them are on fire. You can see extensive damage there. This accident took place about half an hour ago at 9 a.m. local time in New York. The World Trade Centers are very busy office blocks, and as you can see, the fires are still raging. We heard from an eyewitness a short while ago that people were very frightened and running from the scene, and that the explosions there were still out of control, that explosions were still taking place at the World Trade Center as a result of this plane crash. There's some reports too, unconfirmed, that a second plane might also have crashed into the World Trade Center. Jim Fish is here with me in the studio. It's interesting that we're not seeing any rescue helicopters at the moment, isn't it, Jim?
Yes. Now, we can only assume that there are emergency operations going on inside those towers as we speak. Of course, they were built to rigorous safety specifications. They will have systems which can enable them to reach an accident, a disaster of this kind, very high up. These were the world's tallest buildings when they were constructed. They are no longer, but they are among the world's tallest. So there will be systems in place there, emergency backup systems. Even if the lifts are not working, there will be mechanical ways in which they can at least try to approach the scene of the accident. But it is surprising at the moment that there are no helicopters around, flying around there, possibly trying to get at the seat of the accident.
We've got some pictures that have also just come in of a second plane crash, crashing into the other tower at World Trade Center. You can see a huge explosion there. So a double plane accident at the World Trade Center in New York this morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, at a very busy time, at a very busy set of tower blocks. We have no word at the moment of fatalities. Let's just take another look at those pictures of a second plane crash going into the other tower block at the World Trade Center. A huge explosion there, and a most unfortunate event. We have no word at the moment of fatalities, but they are very, very busy office blocks, and it all happened in the morning at a very busy time.
Seeing those pictures, I think one would have to ask, one accident is extraordinary in itself, but two, if that is a second aircraft striking the towers, one would have to ask the question whether this is deliberate sabotage. Bearing in mind that the World Trade Center was the target of a sabotage attempt, a bomb blast a few years ago, I think this must be now in the minds of certainly officialdom in the United States, whether this is in fact not an accident but deliberate.
Yes, Islamic militants were responsible for a large bomb explosion at the World Trade Center a few years ago, and of course it's too early to tell at the moment, but it certainly raises the question, with two plane crashes into the World Trade Center at such a busy time, whether in fact this is a deliberate event and not an accident. For viewers who are just joining us here on BBC World, we're looking at pictures of the Twin Towers in New York, of the World Trade Center, which are ablaze as a result of two small planes which flew directly into the upper stories of the World Trade Center. We'll just show you pictures of the second plane crash, which took place a short while ago, aimed directly at the second World Trade Center, the southern block of the World Trade Center. And you can see an enormous fire there. It's at a very busy time of day, right at the upper stories. We heard from an eyewitness a short while ago that the explosions as a result of those direct hits were still going on. The situation at the World Trade Center was out of control. The World Trade Center, one of New York's big landmarks, looks like it's been the deliberate target of a sabotage attempt, a deliberate terrorist attack on New York's World Trade Center. Joining us now is our New York correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what can you tell us?
Well, there's of course huge speculation here about what has happened. The two towers of the World Trade Center, those two famous towers, both on fire. We do know that about 9 minutes before the top of the hour, a first plane appeared to crash into the upper floors of one of the towers, and then within about 18 minutes later, a second plane or a second explosion happened. But there's of course huge speculation already about how on earth this could happen.
In 1993, of course, there was a major bomb explosion. It must bring back horrible memories of that.
Of course it does, and that's why people are thinking, how on earth could this have happened already? Some commentators are speculating that there was some form of missile involved. Of course, there's no confirmation at all of anything like that. People are talking, was it a deliberate navigational error? Of course, this all refers back to the February 1993 bombing of the World Trade Towers, in which 6 people were killed and more than 1,000 people were injured, and that, of course, a terrorist attack.
Any word of fatalities or injuries, Jane?
Not at all, but obviously this is going to be quite a serious number of injuries. We don't know what planes were traveling, how many people were on them, if any, of course, apart from a pilot. There's really no information at all. People here in New York just glued to live pictures unfolding on the television screens. These towers, just a symbol of New York, and amazing pictures of course, the plane going through almost one of the towers, and just this massive explosion.
Jane, the time of day for this attack, would it have been as office workers were starting their day, or too early for that?
It would have caught quite a number of office workers. The Port Authority headquarters, a big public service agency in New York, of course, in one of those twin towers. And also New York's commuter airports, very, very busy around that time of day, people going to Washington, to Boston, flying out of the city. So with no information at the moment, nobody's got any idea of how many people could have been hurt or injured or killed.
Have the authorities said whether any kind of warning was received about this kind of possible attack?
Certainly that is not on the agenda at the moment. Nobody's talking of any kind of warning. But it must be said that people in New York have been quite conscious that since the American embassy bombers were sentenced here, and one is due still to be sentenced this week, that there could be some kind of revenge involvement, of course, because of this 1993 attack.
Of course, at this stage, it is speculation as to who or what might be behind this attack. But tell us, Jane, at this stage, what kind of reaction are we getting from eyewitnesses as to what exactly happened?
Well, there's some confusion, you know, people talking about possibly some kind of missile. Was it one plane? Was it two? But, of course, we know those bare details of the second plane or the second object going through and exploding the second tower. But eyewitnesses we haven't heard much from yet. I think there will be the shock and disbelief. I mean, it's like a scene from a film almost. It doesn't seem to be real to New Yorkers who I can see just glued to their television screens.
Jane, we're just going to remind viewers of what we're looking at the moment and run pictures that we've got of a second plane which flew directly into the World Trade Center in New York, causing an enormous explosion. Earlier, another plane had flown into the second block of the World Trade Center. This took place at about 9 a.m. New York time, just as office workers would have been gathering for the start of their day. Jane, why is it that the World Trade Center has proved to be such a target for these kind of attacks?
Well, we don't know if this is an attack at all, though the pictures of that second plane heading right towards the tower will, of course,